Leung Chun-ying slams Britain over political reform. Election fever in Macau. And positive world response towards Syrian chemical arms deal.
Good evening. Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying has accused Britain of interfering with Hong Kong's constitutional development. He also said he's against limiting population growth as a way to address the city's housing shortage. The chief executive today met the public at a school in Wan Chai where various groups faced off outside the venue. Stephanie Choi has our top story.
A shouting match between pro and anti-government groups outside today's forum venue in Wan Chai. Some demonstrators were dissatisfied with arrangements made by the police and tried to force their way out of the designated protest area. They were deterred by police warnings. But others were unfazed. A man who insisted that silent protest was not a crime was removed by officers. While pro-government groups praised the Leung Chun-ying administration for looking after the interests of the people, inside the venue, the chief executive assured the public that the government will do all it can to solve housing problems. Responding to suggestions for population control, Leung said even if he does stop anyone from moving to Hong Kong and prevent people from giving birth, there are still 230,000 people on the waiting list for public housing. He said the government will focus on sourcing for land. And Leung responded to British Foreign Office Minister Hugo Swire's opinion piece in a local newspaper, which said Britain stands ready to support Hong Kong towards universal suffrage. The chief executive says the SAR does not need the support of Britain or other foreign countries. He made clear overseas nations should not interfere with Hong Kong's constitutional development. But even as Leung left the forum, emotions were still running high. This is the chief executive's third and final community visit this year, but it remains to be seen whether these outreaches will resolve the growing social tensions that have been dogging Leung Chun-ying's administration from the start. Stephanie Choi, TVB News.
The people of Macau go to the polls today to vote in the enclave's Legislative Assembly election. 14 directly elected seats and 12 indirectly elected seats are up for grabs. Our Jar de Silva is in Macau to tell us more. Jar, over to you.
Indeed, the fact that less than half the number of legislators, the total number of legislators in Macau's Legislative Assembly is being elected by popular vote today doesn't seem to be deterring the enthusiasm of local voters. Official data seems to show that the turnout will be at least as high as in the previous 5 elections, or well above 50%, a figure that is high even by the standards of some Western democracies or even Hong Kong. And of course, as we will see in the following story, many of those out to vote today are from Macau's minority groups. The chief executive of Macau was among those who turned up early to vote at this polling station at a school. Responding to questions of election corruption, Fernando Chui said he believes this is a fair and just election and that the government will strictly enforce the law. It's the first ballot since a controversial public consultation last year, which led to an increase in the number of legislators from 29 to 33. And many people here have high expectations for political reform. Members of the Portuguese community here, for example, have seen their political clout decline since the handover, but they continue to play a role in local politics. A former official says the outcome of the election is hard to predict. He notes, however, that many Portuguese are driven to vote by concerns about livelihood and cultural issues.
There are problems about the inflation, problems about how to get a decent house which is affordable, issues about environment, urban issues. So these are the problems that I suppose most of the Portuguese community here would be caring about the preservation and the use in the way of a Portuguese language as one of the official languages of Macau. It's a major topic for Portuguese, for the Portuguese community as well.
Another group getting a voice, Macau's lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender community. For the first time in the enclave's history, one of the candidates in today's election is openly gay and is promising to defend minority rights if he wins a seat.
It's actually a big step forward. We have just started talking about gay rights, the gay rights movement in Macau, the end of last year. And all of a sudden we have a gay candidates coming out of the closet and running for the election, running for a seat in the assembly. The candidate's position has kick-started a debate on an issue that is still seen as taboo by many in Macau. The number of registered voters has risen to nearly 280,000 this year. 20 lists of candidates are vying for 14 directly elected seats. The other seats are either indirectly elected or appointed by the Macau chief executive. Polling stations are still open and will remain so until 9 o'clock tonight. As for the much expected results, they will not be out before midnight. That's all from me. Back to you in the studio.
Okay, thanks very much, Joao. And that was Joao da Silva reporting live from Macau. Well, let's turn overseas now, and countries around the world have welcomed a US-Russia plan under which Syria's chemical weapons must be removed or destroyed by the middle of next year. But Washington also reminded Syria it would be closely watched to see that it lived up to the terms of the agreement and warned there would be consequences if Damascus failed to comply.
It's been seen as a significant diplomatic breakthrough, which should see Syria get rid of its stockpile of chemical weapons. Whether it marks the beginning of the end of Syria's long and brutal civil war is another question. Last night, US Secretary of State John Kerry and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov agreed on a framework under which inspectors will head to Syria in November and all chemical weapons will be destroyed by the middle of 2014. Kerry explained the first steps of the process.
We agreed that Syria must submit within a week, not in 30 days, but in 1 week, a comprehensive listing, and additional details will be addressed regarding that in the coming days. The world will now expect the Assad regime to live up to its public commitments. And as I said at the outset of these negotiations, there can be no games, no room for avoidance, or anything less than full compliance by the Assad regime.
Many countries welcome the agreement, including China, which, along with Russia, had long called for a diplomatic solution rather than using force to respond to last month's poison gas attack in Syria. As one of Syria's main opposition groups elected a new prime minister, a spokesman said the deal would give Assad more breathing space, although he pledged opposition fighters would allow weapons inspectors safe passage through rebel-controlled areas. Building on the landmark accord would be a peace conference, bringing all parties to the table.
We're now in mid-September, so hopefully we can get something started soon. Jaw is better than war.
The US and Russia will press for a UN Security Council resolution enshrining the chemical weapons agreement. But differences remain over what punitive action would be taken if Syria breaches the terms.
Passengers have begun leaving a Chinese luxury cruise liner that had been stuck in South Korea due to a legal dispute. More than 2,300 passengers and crew members were stranded when a South Korean district court ordered the ship detained in the port of Jeju on Friday. H&A Cruise, the operator of the vessel, said the Jeju court acted upon a request of a Chinese company over legal disputes, but it did not elaborate on what those disputes were. Several flights have been chartered to bring the passengers back to China. Cambodia's main opposition leader kicked off a new wave of demonstrations today against the government of Prime Minister Hun Sen. About 20,000 people attended the rally in Phnom Penh. This came one day after Cambodia's king brought Hun Sen face-to-face with opposition leader Sam Rainsy, urging the two rivals to resolve their differences peacefully. But those supporting Sam Rainsy say their protests will continue until the post-election deadlock is resolved. His Cambodia National Rescue Party insists the election in July, won by the Prime Minister, was marred by serious voting irregularities. Stories of daring rescues were witnessed across the U.S. state of Colorado, where it now lays in ruins due to an epic flood. 4 deaths have been confirmed, but nearly 200 people remain unaccounted for. Flood-devastated Colorado rendered roads invisible as far as the eye can see. Countless people and animals were left stranded in pools of water so deep there's nowhere to turn. Abandoned livestock and drowned-out houses show the reality of just how bleak the situation is. The flood damage is so bad, the governor of Colorado declared a disaster emergency in 14 counties, but remain optimistic.
I think we're more resilient. I think we're going to help each other more.
This woman walked 7 miles to do just that for her relatives.
They're without water, electricity. You know, I felt helpless. So I said, no, I'm taking the journey.
Boulder and towns along the Colorado Rocky Mountains took a major beating from Mother Nature. Incessant rain sent floodwaters rushing down the mountains and through canyons, pushing the runoff into populated areas. North of Boulder, Leon's was virtually cut off when floodwaters washed out the highway and left residents without power and water. The bodies of a couple were recovered near there after being swept away by fast-moving waters. Another body was found in a collapsed building in hard-hit Jamestown. That's where emergency workers scrambled to airlift residents facing impending doom.
We were awakened at 12:45 with reverse 911 and evacuated immediately. By 3 a.m., people's houses were floating.
And Colorado residents aren't out of the woods just yet. Officials warn more heavy rains and thunderstorms will make flash flooding imminent.
And welcome back. Aviation Chief Norman Lo has warned that the Hong Kong International Airport will reach maximum capacity in the next few years if a third runway isn't built. But critics are questioning the push for a proposed third runway when the 2 existing ones aren't fully utilised yet. Diane To has the story.
About 65 flights take off and land at the Hong Kong International Airport every hour. The Civil Aviation Department said its 2-runway system will reach its upper limit of 68 flights per hour by 2015. But back in 1992, a report by the Provisional Airport Authority said the airport would be able to handle some 80 flights an hour. Speaking to TVB News today, Aviation Chief Norman Lo said the Civil Aviation Department and Airport Authority did try and maximize the 2 existing runways, but that they're constrained by hilly terrain.
They have been trying very hard to think of the ways and means to improve the efficiency of the 2-runway system. Even if we can sort of jack it up a bit, I don't think that will be a substantial increase in the runway capacity. So I don't think it is going to help without the third runway.
Critics have pointed out that the capacity issue isn't to do with just the runways, but other aspects as well, such as a lack of airspace and parking bays. Law said authorities have been trying to resolve these problems.
They are having a huge project in the middle of the airfield, and it's called the Midfield Concourse. And eventually, within 2 years, I think they will be able to provide 20 extra bridge bays, and that is very important to us.
Still, Law insisted the 2 runways can handle a maximum of 70 flights an hour at best. And with flight movements increasing at about 5.5% annually, the runways will become overloaded by 2017. But the Airport Development Concern Network has raised doubts about the aviation chief's comments, saying the runways should operate with greater flexibility rather than one used mainly for departures and the other mainly for arrivals, as it is now. The group is insisting that the $136 billion third runway is not needed when there are still better ways to make use of the current runways. Diane To, TVB News.
Hong Kong's first official poverty line is expected to be announced later this month. The government is now under growing pressure to set concrete targets and establish clear policies in the fight against poverty. Ronnie Samtani has more.
A forum on poverty was held in Sham Shui Po this afternoon to discuss how Hong Kong could narrow its wealth gap. Among those on hand, lawmakers Fernando Cheung, Kwok Ka-ki, and Sin Chung Kai, who are pushing the government to take concrete action to follow up on the release of its first official poverty line in about 2 weeks' time.
We hope that after the release of the data, the government could formulate a target, a poverty alleviation target. Say within 5 years, they hope to make use of different measures like low-income supplement or universal pension scheme to reduce the poverty rate to, say, lower than 10%. This will show the government's commitment.
Choi said Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying's government has taken steps to fight poverty, but he said schemes such as old age living allowance are still not enough to tackle the problem. Ronnie Samtani, TVB News.
It is Save the Arctic Day to highlight the challenges facing one of the world's most fragile ecosystems. Activists here join many others around the world in an urban bike ride. There were also calls for the local government to promote a cycling-friendly culture here in Hong Kong. Kirti Nandwani reports.
Ready, set, go. In the searing heat, more than 200 people got on their bikes to raise awareness about the effects of climate change on the Arctic and the impact of oil drilling there.
I believe in the movement of trying to save the world through global warming. You know, and Shell are drilling in the Arctic Circle, the ice is all melting, and what kind of a future we got to leave our children or our grandchildren?
Cyclists made a round trip between Chater Road in Central and North Point. They staged a protest at a Shell gas station along the way and handed a petition demanding the company end its multi-billion-dollar oil drilling program in the Arctic.
Drilling is not really safe in the extreme weather condition like Arctic. We are trying to show that Hong Kong citizens have the will to cut down our oil consumption, which we don't need the oil company to drill in the Arctic, which is very valuable to our climatic system and also ecosystem.
Activists also urged the government to promote an urban cycling culture to reduce Hong Kong's carbon footprint.
The government tried to promote, cycling can only be used in a leisure, mode of transportation. That makes, the driver behavior, is not so friendly to cyclists. That's the main reason I think, we must have some good cycling, friendly policy in Hong Kong.
Cycling is good for keeping fit, and environmental groups say it can also be an alternative mode of transportation to promote an environmentally friendly Hong Kong. Kirti Nandwani, TVB News.
And that is our news. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.